Tanzania, once a battleground for empires, a land of resistance and a symbol of African unity. For centuries, its people have fought for survival, from the great Swahili trade routes to the brutality of German and British colonial rule. But freedom did not come easily. This is a story of a nation that rose from oppression, challenged the might of colonial powers, and forged its own destiny. But was independence truly the beginning of freedom, or did colonialism simply evolve into a new form? Long before European colonization, Tanzania's coast was a thriving center of commerce, the Swahili coast. Stretching from Somalia to Mozambique, connected Africa to Arabia, Persia, and even as far as China. Traders exchanged gold, ivory, and spices for things like textiles, ceramics, and glass beads, creating one of Africa's most diverse and advanced civilizations. The Swahili city-states of Kilwa, Zanzibar, and Bagamoyo flourished, becoming wealthy hubs of trade. But these cities were not just economic centers. They were cultural bridges. Islam, introduced by Arab merchants, blended with local African traditions, and Swahili emerged as the lingua franca, fusing Arabic, Bantu, and Persian influences into one of Africa's most unique cultures. In 1498, Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama became the first European to reach the coast of East Africa, marking the beginning of Portuguese influence in the region, including modern-day Tanzania. At the time, the Swahili city-states like Kilwa, Kisiwani, Zanzibar, and Mombasa were thriving centers of trade, linked to the Indian Ocean trade network. But by 1505, the Portuguese, led by Francisco de Almeida, launched a military campaign to seize control of key trading cities along the coast. Their goal was to dominate the lucrative gold, ivory, and spice trade, which had previously been controlled by Arab and Swahili merchants. They sacked Kilwa, Kisiwani, Mombasa, and Zanzibar, establishing forts and trading posts to secure their control. For nearly 200 years, the Portuguese maintained a loose grip over the Swahili coast, collecting taxes from local rulers while defending their trading interests. However, their rule was never fully stable. Swahili merchants and Arab traders resented European interference and often resisted Portuguese authority. By the late 1600s, a new power arrived, the Omanis, seeking control of East Africa's lucrative trade. They expelled the Portuguese and made Zanzibar their capital in the early 19th century. Under Sultan Sanbid Sultan, Zanzibar became the economic heart of East Africa, famous for clove plantations and its role in the Indian Ocean trade. However, Omani rule also intensified East African slave trade. Thousands of people from Tanzania's interior were captured, forced to march to the coast, and sold in Zanzibar's slave markets. Some rebelled or fled, forming hidden communities that resisted foreign rule. While Zanzibar thrived under Omani leadership, tensions were rising. European powers, seeing the region's economic potential, began to intervene, not just to trade, but to control. As the British and Germans arrived in the late 19th century, Zanzibar's dominance began to decline. Missionaries and European diplomats pressured the Sultan to end the slave trade, while European traders sought full control over East Africa's resources. It was no longer about commerce, it was about colonial conquest. The dominance of Swahili traders and the Omani Sultanate would not last forever. By the 19th century, European forces arrived not just as traders, but as conquerors. The fight for Tanzania's land and its future was about to begin. By the late 19th century, European powers no longer wanted to just trade with Africa, they wanted to own it. In 1884, at the infamous Berlin Conference, European nations met to divide Africa among themselves, without a single African leader present. This event became known as the Scramble for Africa. Germany took control of Tanganyika, which is mainland Tanzania, while Britain controlled Zanzibar and Pemba, which are the islands. With borders drawn on a map, colonial rule began, whether Tanzanians wanted it or not. Under German rule, Tanzanians were forced to work on cotton and sisal plantations, pay heavy taxes, and submit to strict colonial laws. Many resisted, but Germany responded with brutal force. The first major resistance came in 1888, when Abushiri bin Salim al-Harthi, an Arab Swahili leader, led a revolt against German rule along the coast. He united local Africans and Arabs against foreign domination, but Germany crushed the rebellion, executing Abushiri in 1889. Though next, the biggest uprising came in 1905 with the Maji Maji Rebellion, led by King Jeketo Ngwale. Thousands of Tanzanians rose up against German oppression. Warriors believed that sacred water, which is Maji in Swahili, could protect them from bullets. But against Germans' modern machine guns, over 100,000 people were killed, many from starvation as the Germans burned their villages. While Germany ruled mainland Tanganyika, Britain controlled Zanzibar. In 1896, when the pro-British Sultan of Zanzibar died, his successor, Sultan Khalid bin Bargash, refused to accept British rule. The British responded with the shortest war in history, lasting only 38 minutes. In less than an hour, British warships bombarded Zanzibar's palace, killing over 500 people, forcing the Sultan to flee and installing a puppet ruler loyal to Britain. Germany's rule ended after the First World War, when Britain took over Tanganyika as the League of Nations mandate. While British rule was less violent, it still relied on forced labour, taxation and land displacement. But change was coming. By the 1950s, a new leader had emerged, Julius Nyerere, who would lead the fight for independence and shape Tanzania's future. But change was coming. By the 1950s, a new leader emerged, Julius Nyerere, a school teacher turned politician who would lead the fight for independence and shape Tanzania's future. At a time when British rule still controlled Tanganyika's economy and governance, Nyerere's vision was clear. Africa must govern itself. He was not alone. Across the continent, independence movements were rising. Ghana had broken free in 1957, and Kenya's Mau Mau rebellion had shaken British rule in East Africa. In Tanganyika, the struggle would take a different path, one of strategy, unity, and political mobilization. In 1954, Nyerere founded the Tanganyika African National Union, TANU, the political movement that would become the driving force behind independence. Unlike violent uprisings seen elsewhere, Nyerere chose a different path: peaceful resistance and political negotiation. TANU's goal was simple: unite all the Tanganyikans, regardless of tribe or background, under the common cause of self-rule. With the power of words and mass mobilization, the movement spread like wildfire. However, British authorities were not ready to hand over power. They controlled the economy, the military, and the legal system. Nyerere knew that winning the people's support was just the first step. He needed to pressure Britain into action. By 1957, Britain realised that change was inevitable, but they wanted to control the pace. They introduced limited elections, hoping to delay full independence, but Nyerere saw an opportunity. He encouraged his supporters to participate in the system, win seats, and push for reform from within. The strategy worked. In the 1958 and 1960 elections, TANU won overwhelmingly, providing that the people demanded self-rule. The pressure on Britain mounted, and in 1960, Nyerere was appointed Chief Minister, the first Tanganyikan to lead his own people in government. The final step was near. Full independence was now within reach. With international support growing and Britain losing its grip over its colonies, the final negotiations for Tanganyika's independence began. Nyerere travelled to London, where he and British officials agreed on a peaceful transfer of power. On December 9th, 1961, Tanganyika officially became independent. Thousands gathered in Dar es Salaam as the British flag was lowered, and the new Tanganyikan flag was raised for the first time. For the first time nearly in a century, Tanganyika was free. Julius Nyerere was now the leader of the new nation, but his mission was far from over. Independence was just the beginning. 3 years later, in 1964, Tanganyika and Zanzibar would merge to form what we know now as Tanzania, a union that brought new challenges and opportunities. But as Tanzania stepped into its future, one question remained. How would this young nation balance its independence with economic growth and global influence? In 1967, Nyerere introduced the Arusha Declaration, launching the Ujamaa Socialist Program. The goal? A self-sufficient Tanzania, free from foreign dependency. Land was collectivized, industries were nationalized, and rural communities were reorganized into cooperative villages. At first, Ujamaa seemed promising. Literacy rates improved, healthcare expanded, and national unity strengthened. But soon, cracks began to show. By the late 1970s, Ujamaa was struggling. Forced collectivization led to food shortages, and Tanzania's economy was collapsing. The government depended on foreign aid, contradicting its original goal of self-reliance. By the 1980s, Tanzania was forced to abandon socialism. Under pressure from the IMF and World Bank, the country began privatizing industries, opening markets, and shifting towards capitalism. But for many Tanzanians, this new economic model brought more challenges than opportunities. After years of one-party state, Tanzania took another major step, introducing multi-party democracy in 1995. While this opened the door for political competition, the ruling party, CCM, has remained dominant. At the same time, foreign investment poured in, transforming cities like Dar es Salaam. But as Tanzania embraced globalization, a new debate emerged. Who truly benefits from this growth? Today, Tanzania is one of Africa's fastest growing economies, growing at around 8% each year. The government has invested heavily in roads, railways, ports and energy projects, such as in Tanga. Many funded by China and international lenders. But the question remains, who is really benefiting? While Dar es Salaam is booming, many rural Tanzanians still live in poverty. Foreign companies dominate key industries, and concerns over economic dependencies have risen. Is Tanzania truly independent? Or has it just entered a new era of neo-colonialism? Tanzania has come a long way since the day it gained independence in 1961. From a colony ruled by foreign powers to a sovereign nation striving for self-sufficiency. Its journey has been one of ambition, resilience, and transformation. In just a few decades, Tanzania has emerged as one of Africa's fastest growing economies. Roads stretch further, cities expanded, industries evolve, and new opportunities arise. From Dar es Salaam to Dodoma, progress is visible. But while the nation moves forward, challenges remain. The benefit of this economic growth have not been felt equally across all communities. For many, life has improved, but for others, change has come slowly. A key driver of Tanzania's development has been foreign investment. China in particular has played a major role in financing massive infrastructure projects, from highways and railways to energy and telecommunications. These projects have provided jobs, improved transportation, and expanded trade. But some ask, who truly benefits? Many of these investments come in the form of loans, meaning Tanzania must eventually repay billions of dollars, often with interest. Chinese companies dominate the contracts, sometimes bringing their own labour rather than relying on local workers. Meanwhile, Tanzanian industries struggle to compete as foreign goods flood the market. It's a complex relationship, one that brings both opportunity and dependency. Tanzania stands at a crossroad. Foreign investment is fueling economic expansion, but can the nation ensure that Tanzanians themselves benefit the most? As industries grow, how can the government protect local businesses while still encouraging trade? How can rural communities share in the nation's success, rather than being left behind? The balance between global partnership and self-reliance will define the next chapter of Tanzania's story. If managed well, Tanzania has the potential to become a true leader in African development, an independent economic force, not just a destination for foreign investment. Despite its challenges, Tanzania's future is bright. With a young and ambitious population, a growing economy, and a rich landscape of natural resources, the country has everything it needs to succeed. If investment is carefully managed, if trade deals are negotiated wisely, and if local industries are strengthened, Tanzania could set an example for other African nations. One that provides economic success doesn't have to come at the cost of independence. Julius Nyerere once said, "Independence means self-determination, not dependence on others." The story of Tanzania is far from over. Its future will be shaped not just by its leaders, but by its people.